All right, next question. Carrie wrote in. Carrie said, I am totally against the death penalty, and I'm generally against trying children as adults, but I'm not totally sure about juvenile sentencing. When should juvenile offenders receive life sentences, if at all? Okay, Lewis, should juvenile offenders, if you were under 18 at the time you committed a crime, regardless of whether you're tried as an adult or as a juvenile, is there ever a situation where you say the juvenile should be sentenced to life in prison?
Yes, I think that certainly could happen, should happen in certain cases. In cases where you have someone who might be 16, 17, who is a vicious, harmful killer, and if it's clear to the psychiatrists and those who analyze this person that they are just that disturbed, what do you do with a person like that?
So if someone is 16 and a half or 17 and it was a particularly egregious crime, heinous crime, because it's close enough to 18, you'd be okay with a life sentence in prison?
There are plenty of 15 and 16-year-olds who have a much better understanding of what they're doing and why they're doing it than 19 and 20-year-olds. I understand why that 18 mark exists, but let's be honest here. I mean, it's in reality, it's really not a true marker of anything.
So some 15-year-olds, you would say it would be acceptable in your mind, depending on the particulars, to say life in prison.
Depending on the particulars, I think so.
What about a 14-and-a-half-year-old? Would there be any situation where a 14-and-a-half-year-old, you would say, this is a particular situation, I think a life sentence is appropriate or correct here?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
There would be.
Yep.
What about a 14-year-old? Not 14-and-a-half, they're 14.
Yeah, it's same thing. What's the
Same
difference?
thing.
What's the difference?
So now what if it's a 13-and-a-half-year-old, looks very advanced, and is a serial killer, kills 3 people, right? Is there a situation where a 13-and-a-half-year-old would be worthy of a life sentence?
Well, people might go crazy here. What kind of life sentence, though? I mean, are we talking in an adult prison, in a juvenile prison, a juvenile to adult after a certain age?
Well, you don't stay in a juvenile prison once you're 30. I mean,
or some type of mental health facility.
Yep.
There are going to be cases where it doesn't matter what the age of the person is. There's someone who needs to be looked after or kept in a certain place for their whole lives. Those people exist.
Even at 13-and-a-half?
It could be very clear at that age. It could be.
12-and-a-half?
I don't think you're going to hit me with any age here. That eventually you're going to get to a point where the age is just so young that they wouldn't even be able to commit the crimes we're talking about.
Well, this is exactly the point, right? If you say 18 is when you're an adult, 18 is when you can buy tobacco, whatever, right? Whatever is associated with that. We have to, as a society, have some limits. It can't all just be subjective because, as you can see very quickly, Lewis first said, listen, it's if a 17 or 16-and-a-half-year-old. Well, 15-and-a-half-year-olds, you can really tell a lot about what they understand. Yeah, I mean, if it's a 14-and-a-half-year-old, 14, 13-and-a-half, Lewis is basically going all the way down to the point at which he said, physically, they probably wouldn't even be able to carry out whatever crime we're talking about. So I sympathize with you, Lewis, in that I can imagine specific 16-year-olds that commit a particular crime, and we say, that is so bad that I can see a life sentence here. But as a society, we see what happens too often incorrectly with sort of judicial discretion. So I hesitate to be open to the idea. I think that if we're dealing with juveniles here, we're dealing with juveniles, and the rules governing that need to be fixed to some degree. Now, there can be variation between that, where you can say, okay, even though they're a 17-year-old, they are going to have to be in a supervised mental facility until well into adulthood because of the nature of their crime.
Right.
But I think as a society, we're really opening up a very dangerous door when you take a 16-and-a-half-year-old, and I get it. It could be a heinous crime. It could be absolutely horrible. But to say we are now going to put the 16-and-a-half-year-old in a juvenile facility until they're 21, and then in an adult facility for the rest of their lives, maybe with the possibility of parole, maybe without. I have a real problem with that as a society.
Do you? So if that 16-year-old killed 10 different very, very young children,
yeah,
what would you say to that? I mean, viciously murdered.
Here's the thing. This is sort of the same question as to the death penalty, right? Which is, we can all imagine a situation where we would want to see a certain punishment. But would it be justice or would it be vengeance? I'm against the death penalty. If someone showed up and killed my parents and my brother and sister and people that I know and love, I can definitely imagine being at a place in my head where I say, this person needs to die. I want this person to die. That would not change anything about the realities of the death penalty that we know.
That's
so
true.
I hesitate to say I can come up with a viscerally impactful scenario that would make me abandon the principles that I think make sense here.
Well, maybe we'll just disagree. But what I'm saying is monsters exist.
Yeah.
And whether or not you
Which I don't disagree with.
Maybe. Yeah, people might disagree. I think some people you can't change. Whether you discover this monster when they're at the age of 14 or whether you discover them when they're at the age of 21, what's the difference?
You lock them up as soon as possible.
You have to remove that person from society.
Send me your thoughts on this. I know there will be a variety of opinions on this.